as we get closer to the NBA draft, my kind of tier list continually changes for the Chicago Bulls on players that I really like for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to look at that tier list today. We're going to look at sleepers. We're going to look at the high upside players, ready to go now players, and players that might fall that the Chicago Bulls could take a look at as well. Plus, since it's Sunday, we're going to go into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform that we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it for today. So I want to look at the current kind of prospects for the Chicago Bulls in this draft that sit in a bunch of different tier lists. I said it in the intro, but just to go over that tier list, we're going to look at the players that are ready to contribute now, meaning players that come in, if the Bulls were to draft them, they kind of, if the Bulls are going to keep continuity being the thing, these are players that you can add to what the Bulls are already doing that I think could really help raise the ceiling of the Bulls. Not necessarily my favorite tier of players, but we have that. We're also going to go into the high upside picks. These are picks that have tremendous upside, that still have a little bit to get to contribute now, but are really big upside picks for the Bulls. Players that could fall to the Chicago Bulls that I think they really have to take a look at if they're there at number 11. And then the sleepers that are overall in this draft. These are more so players that are slated to go later in the draft that maybe if the Bulls do trade down for, they can end up getting. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into these prospects for today. And so I want to start with the ready now prospects. These are prospects that, like I said, have that skill, that are ready to contribute right away for the NBA level, still have a ceiling, right? Maybe not as high of a ceiling, but have a super high floor. That would have been a better name for this tier of players. You think about things when you're on the go, but it is what it is when it comes down to it, right? It is what it is. We'll deal with it. So the player that I want to talk about with a very high floor for the Chicago Bulls potentially is a player that we heard being named around the Bulls more so towards the beginning of the draft process, and that's Dalton Knecht. I really still like Dalton Knecht, his ability to be a scorer, 21 points per game last year in college, and almost 39% three-point shooter. This is a guy who can do it, can score from every level. He's a three-level scorer, not necessarily the major finisher that you see, but he's like a supercharged version of Max Strus in a lot of ways. I could see him sticking around in the NBA for a long time. Also, he has better off-ball defense than like a Max Strus right now. He also is a very clutch player, and that's something that we need, especially if or when we move on from DeMar DeRozan. We're going to need that. This is a guy who, just in the three-point shooting, is absolutely dynamic, and he also runs the floor pretty well as well. He can score off the dribble, on the dribble. He knows how to create his own shot and create space for himself. He's for Tennessee, he was basically their go-to scorer, so he's not going to be that at the NBA level, but because he does have that history, there is more than enough reason to believe he's going to be able to bring that. Also, a solid rebounder at the wing position at almost 5 rebounds per game. He gets 9.2 of the rebound percentage when it comes down to it. That's a really solid percentage for a non-big, meaning non-power forward or center, and I really like what he does. Also, 6.5 three-pointers per game, hitting that at a 39% clip is extremely good. The assist-to-turnover ratio is a little, right? So he doesn't have that necessarily upside of being maybe a playmaking wing, but he shows a little bit of that. If he can, maybe work on that part of a game, it could definitely be better for him. And he also passes out and identifies double teams really well. Now, it's not projected that he's going to be double teamed too much at the NBA level, but again, he cuts without the ball, without the ball. He moves without the ball as well. He understands how to take advantage of mismatches. We don't know how many of those are going to be at the NBA level for him, but I really do like him a lot. His weakest part is defense, especially the more physical kind of wings in the NBA. There's definitely that question if he's going to be able to do that at the NBA level. But ultimately, I really like Knecht for the Chicago Bulls if they were going to go high floor and keep most of this team the same. Dalton Knecht is a player that really does help. Same thing with the next player I'm going to talk about, and that's Donovan Clingan. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, what about Zach Edey? You guys know I'm not big on Zach Edey, not big on Zach Edey for the Chicago Bulls team. I think I understand the draft combine measurables were really good for him. I want a little bit more upside. And I know people are going to go to, well, what about the matchup when it was him? Like Mario Chalmers killed Derrick Rose almost every time they played. And Derrick Rose was the better player. So I'm not really worried about the one-on-one matchup in the NCAA tournament. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the overall prospect themselves. And I like Donovan Clingan. He still has a lot of upside. He does bring it as far as rebounding, defense, scoring on the interior, blocking shots. He brings a lot of all those things that we really do need, and he brings an upgrade to the center position. And if we do lose Andre Drummond, which definitely seems like it's a far-gone conclusion here, I like the ability to bring him. He has excellent potential as a defender, right? I get it. People say the slow foot speed, but you got to look at what he does defensively. He's really solid defensively. He's also drastically improved from the freshman to sophomore year. He has great basketball IQ, the awareness, all those type of things. He pick and roll defense and pick and roll offense really good. Solid passer out the post as well. I know people have said, well, is he Nikola Vucevic? No, he's already a much better defender than what Nikola Vucevic ever was. And I honestly think his passing is right up there with Vooch. Now, we got to ask ourselves who already use that passing, but I do think that he can be an extremely solid passer, especially from the elbows. And the difference between like a Donovan Clingan and Vooch, Donovan Clingan doesn't have to start his offense from the mid-range like Vooch does. Donovan Clingan is a more back-to-the-basket post scorer that can shoot as well and has shown tremendous upside shooting also. You got to ask yourself if you think that's going to be something that's continual for him. Free throw shooting is his biggest thing. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have the kind of advanced post moves, but he still has enough post moves that I like him for. And he shot the three. He's one of those players as well that shot the three super effective in high school, but not really in college. So maybe you look at the upside there as well, but I'm not really, again, I get it. The more modern centers, you do want to shoot threes. But again, this is kind of more, these aren't my favorite prospects. These are just prospects. If the Chicago Bulls are betting on continuity once again, these are some of the guys that they can look at. Now, high upside, this is my favorite tier of draft prospects because, again, the Bulls aren't close enough to where even if we do get a high ceiling player, a high floor player, that it's really going to turn us into any type of true contender. High upside is where I like to be at, especially in a draft like this, where a lot of the prospects are kind of unproven. And I got three players here that we've all talked a lot about. Khalil Ware is one of my favorite ones in this draft, and I love the fact that Khalil Ware is shooting up mock drafts. And a lot of mocks have him now going in the top 10, whereas about a month ago, they had him going towards in the 20s, right? The motor was the biggest concerns from him. But I think when you look at players like a Derek Lively and things like that, he has the tremendous upside to be able to impact the game like that. Big lob threat, has great interior scoring on top of that, amazing shot blocker at almost 2 shots per game, athleticism out the wazoo when it comes down to it. This is a guy that has the type of athleticism while the versatile, switching defensively, projecting wise, that's all there. The bigger question for him is motor, and it seems like in private workouts, those motor concerns are starting to go away for him. He can be a little bit sloppy passing the ball, so if he's going to turn into a solid passer as a big man, you're going to have to really, really adjust that for him. And he needs to work on setting picks. With his size, his athleticism, if he can become a solid pick setter and know how to roll and even hit a mid-range shot off that pick, become a pick and pop player. Yeah, listen, that can the upside for Khalil Ware is why he's shooting up this. And listen, the ball from three, the shooting from three, he brings that as well as being the trailer in transition, where he's already a threat to finish to slam it on your head in transition. Khalil Ware brings a lot of that potential for the Chicago Bulls. And the two players that I kind of have as the high upside, kind of for me, about the same as Tejan Saloon and Matas Bucilis. Now, the difference is Matas Bucilis has been kind of projected to go in like the top 4 to 5. Some are recently starting to have him falling. Tejan Saloon is a player that has always kind of been there around the number 11 spot. Well, some mocks have him higher than that. But these are two guys that have point forward potential, that have tremendous up. These are some of the biggest upside picks. Would not be surprised if either one of these guys end up being one of the best players to come out of this draft when it's all said and done. And if you're looking at a draft to kind of bite on potential, Tejan Saloon, Matas Bucilis, those are kind of my two favorite players. And this is my favorite group of players right here that I really like the potential and high upside of those guys. And then the next one, players that might fall in drafts. And some of the mocks are starting to have these guys fall a little bit more regularly. Ron Holland, Devin Carter, Cody Williams are the 3 picks there. Devin Carter, mainly because of the promise, and he does have tremendous upside as a scorer, a pick and roll ball handler, a defender as well, even with him in a small size. The rebounding numbers were something that really stood out to me big time when it came to Devin Carter. And then Ron Holland is a player that I initially did not cover for the Chicago Bulls. I came back and kind of players that were, I put him on in the video of players that were going to go before the Bulls, but they could be interested in. Ron Holland, as a wing/guard in this league, has the type of upside defensively that you go for. He got that dog in him, absolutely. Athleticism out the wazoo, on-ball defense. A lot of the kind of solid defenders we talk about are more off-ball. Ron Holland, on-ball defense is right there, ready to go, ready to be that in the NBA. He is so aggressive defensively. I love watching the brand of defense that he plays. Absolutely. He can guard multiple positions as well. And he's one of the youngest players in the draft class as well. He's still going to be 18 on draft day, 19 most of the majority of his season. Kind of the negatives on him, not really a great spot-up shooter, which is probably why he's falling in that. He's really right-hand dominant, but like I've said, even when I scouted him before, we've seen players. Jaylen Brown is one of the better players in the NBA, and he can't go left. So so it's things like that, but it's something that are knocks on him when people look at him as well. And then you have Cody Williams. This is a guy who initially was slated or mocked a lot to go to the Chicago Bulls. He's gone up and down a little bit since then. I think he's now in most mocks he's dropped even further. And this is a guy that I don't hate as a prospect. I just think he's kind of similar to what we've done already. And that's where it comes down to. Really up and down freshman year on top of that. It projects to be like a 3-and-D player that hasn't done either consistently yet, but the raw potential is there. It's just that I see players, and I get it why he's slated to go in like the top 10 in a lot of mocks. He has that upside to do that, but he's not a tremendous athlete at all. He can't dunk the ball, but he's not like this world-class athlete at any point. His three-point shooting has been underwhelming so far. He's going to have to get stronger at the NBA level, but he still does bring some really, really great things as far as feel for the game, a finisher around the rim. He can get out. He has that point forward potential in the high upside part of his game. But again, I kind of have a lot of players ranked above him, but he is one of those players that might fall to the Chicago Bulls. And then lastly, sleepers. These are guys that I really like in this draft, but even with how I like them, I don't see the Bulls drafting them at number 11. They're slated to go lower. Maybe if the Bulls trade down, maybe they look at some of these guys. And some of my favorite ones, Tristan da Silva. This is a guy I've been talking about since I started watching his tape. All I can think of is Jaime Jaquez type impact right away. This guy can do it all. One of the biggest knocks on why he's going later in the draft, which he's even been rising some. Initially, he was looked at as being maybe even a second-round pick. He's going more towards the 18-20 range in a lot of mocks now. But this is a guy who brings almost everything you need as a modern power forward. 6'8" with the 6'11" wingspan. He can space the floor. He has multiple positions that he can play and defend. Really good off-ball defense. He's a dog as well. And the three-point shooting, 39% on almost 5 attempts per game. Extremely solid three-point shooter. He's also a very solid passer. That point forward upside for him is legitimate. And he's drawn comparisons to, again, like a Jaime Jaquez, mixed between Jaime Jaquez and Kyle Anderson for those that are looking at that. Really good player that I like. And I can see him not necessarily being one of the better players in this draft, but I can see him being one of those type of role players that ends up developing that the fans of teams just love. I really like Tristan da Silva in this draft. Next up, Yves Missy. Listen, a lot of people like Yves Missy. The problem is it's just defensive upside with him. Doesn't really have too much offensive upside. As a lob threat and things like that, absolutely. But you look at blocking shots, being that lob threat, like we said, rebounding, he is going to get after the ball. Extreme hustle there. But then there are some motor concerns. Not really motor concerns, but endurance concerns. He's never really played a whole hell of a lot of minutes, which is something there. The verticality as well is something with him. He's going to foul a lot initially in the league, but I still think that he has tremendous upside in this draft. He's just going to fall because of those reasons. He's only played a little over 20 minutes in his career, so the conditioning is a big question. And when you're a center that is athletic, a lob threat, can't really shoot the ball too much right outside of that, that motor concern there is for a conditioning concern. That's a big one, and that's why he's going to go later in this first round. But I do think he's a player that absolutely can end up being better than that. It just depends on how they develop him as well. And then the last one that I have in this tier is Tyler Smith. And Tyler Smith was actually one of my favorite prospects in this draft. But if the monster to be believed, he's going somewhere between 20 and 25, which I think at 20 or 25, somebody's going to get some amazing, amazing talent out of a guy like Tyler Smith. But because of that, I don't really see the Bulls biting on him at number 11 when he's slated to go 9 to 11 picks later, right? So that's something that you got to look at. The three-point shooting, immediately solid in that one. He can shoot the ball ridiculously well. A really good pick and roll player as well, can lob threat, all those type of things. But at the end of the day, the defense is just not there for him at all. The defense is not there, and there's also some strength issues and toughness issues with him that's brought about some concerns with him. If he's not dunking, he doesn't do anything at the rim. Dunking at the rim is really good. No post moves quite yet. Still a young player at 19 years old, so that is going to come down to it. So the people there's questions about his three-point shooting percentage. So he shot 35.6%. It is what it is, but he has that tremendous upside there. But he's still a guy that I really like in this draft. I just don't see the Bulls going that early on a Tyler Smith type player. But that's my thought process. Those are my tiers right now. This may be a weekly thing up until we get to the draft. I may revisit this every Sunday up until then. But you guys can let me know kind of your tier list and players that you really like in this draft. This isn't the only players that I like in this draft. It's just per what we're doing right now. Those are my favorite players right now. This could change daily almost, right? But it is Sunday, so that means this episode is built around your voicemails. Let's get into this first one. This one's from Corn.
Hey, what's the word, King? It's Corn. Hey, let's get right into it, King. This one is about Devin Carter. Let's get into Devin Carter. It was surprised when they said AK promised him. So I wanted to, before I go in to say anything, I wanted to, scout him, watch some tape on him. No. I would not pick him in the first round. Reason why. First of all, awkward shot. 37% from three, 24% from mid. Not really a good shooter. Another thing, he's not really a good dribbler. Turnover ratio is worrying. He's very erratic at times. Very erratic. Let's just say this. We already have that type of player. We already have a Devin Carter. That player is Dalen Terry. That player is Julian Phillips. That player, so it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me to pick Devin Carter for those reasons right there. Not a great shooter, not a great ball handler, okay with passing vision, okay? The plus side is he is a good defender, good on-ball defender. He plays bigger than his height, 6'3", but he plays big. Got heart, I like that. It just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. I wouldn't pick him at 11 if we are moving back or something, because they projected him to be 20 to 25. But like I said, he looked like he's going to be a good prospect, but I'm tired of that right now. I kind of want a short thing, and with him, with his issues and problems, I really don't need that on the Bulls because we already got enough players like that, and he's a little bit older as a senior already. He's 22 years old. We got an IO. He reminds me of we got these guys that's already Devin Carter. So that's about it, King. Appreciate you like always. Blessings. See Red Nation, man.
I'm sorry, Corn. This is the most I've ever disagreed with. You do realize he shot 37%, really almost 38% at 37.3. That would put him at near elite in the NBA level, especially when you pair in how many three-point shots he took. So you saying he's not a good three-point shooter, I just can't agree with that at all. Like that percentage would put him up there with like one of your favorite players, D'Lo, right? Puts him as a better three-point shooter than Max Strus, Tyler Hero. These are guys that are looked at as solid shooters in the NBA. And again, the 37% at his taking almost 7 3-pointers per game, that would be near elite, bro. So I don't get where you're getting at with the three-point shooting, him not being a three-point shooter. He's legitimately a three-point shooter. And you compared him to Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, I got to disagree with you there. His offensive game is already miles ahead of where they are because he can get to the rim. He's a solid rebounder. He's a great finisher around the rim as well. He can hit, his layup package is excellent. Those guys, we had questions on what their offense was going to be. He brings the defense. He brings the offense. He brings all of those things. And as a point guard, he has a really good feel for the game. Now, the assist number 3.5 and the turnover ratio 2.6 turnovers per game are concerning. But when you look at what he does in pick and rolls, how he attacks closeouts on defense, his ability to make decisions in the fast break and finish around the rim in the fast break, and also his shooting, which you said isn't good, is actually really damn good. I just don't know what you're getting at with this one, Corn. Again, I'm not saying that he's a perfect prospect for the Bulls. It surprised me to hear that that's the player that they could have made a promise to. But when what he brings, I mean, especially if you're looking at him maybe replacing Alex Caruso off the bench because Ayo and Kobe are now your starters, I don't hate that at all. I actually think as a lead guard off the bench, he could be somebody who can make sure that that bench unit stays involved in the game. And if he's checking in for a Kobe or Ayo, he can do a lot of things and guard multiple positions. So this is just one I don't personally agree with you all on, Corn. I'm not saying that we should love him as a prospect, but what he brings is legitimate, and it's legitimate to the NBA level, in my opinion. But you guys can let me know what you guys think on that one down below. All right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one is from Dre.
Yo, hey, this is Dre, man. I was calling, man. I seen your last video. I was just thinking, like, when you was talking about Billy and everything, and I was just thinking, like, the first year where everybody was, had high hopes for him and, thought that we was going to go, however far we going to go, and it didn't work out. I was thinking, like, what if we would have made it to the first or second round, or however we would have went, whatever, right? Would we, would have praised him? Cause you said, the following year was, the rebuild year, and, after that, it's been pretty much downhill. So, my really thought process today is, is we really fault him for, the rebuild years and after that? I mean, because it really been downhill after that, that 21 year, whatever. But I was thinking, will we be, still talking about Billy in the same sense? Far as, I'm not saying he a terrible coach. But you know how our fans is, they think he's the coach for the team. And I ain't saying that either. I'm just saying, will we be still talking about him in the same sense if that year would've went, I don't want to say successful, if we would've went to a okay point, So, I don't know, because, he do get a lot of slack, because, he do some dumbass shit, But I don't know. I think he's probably got a little bit, more respect on his name, I guess. But I don't know. I just think maybe after that rebuild year, he had a rebuild team. What could we do with a rebuild team? I don't know. Well, I ain't gonna say a rebuild team or a hurt team. It was a handicap team. So I don't know. Yeah, and I like the little prospects and shit that you be doing too, man. So keep it up with that. I'll be watching that every time you drop. But yeah. See red, like you said, I'm out, man.
Listen, that's a great insight on Billy. Like I said, and I try to always be fair, I have major criticisms for Billy Donovan. Do I want him to coach my basketball team? At this point, I feel like I've seen enough. But I also think that, like with most things, with players, coaches, whatever, that the criticism around him has gone too far to trying to make him a terrible head coach. He is not a terrible head coach. The hand that he's been dealt here hasn't been great. Now, he hasn't handled the pieces that he's had always best either. But listen, I don't know if going to the second round 2 years ago would change now because we still are where we are. And that's not all due to Billy. Billy Donovan isn't the only problem for the Chicago Bulls. Now, his inability to use players to their best skill set, to their strengths, him playing players out of position. Again, some of that could be looked at as roster construction. Those are all legitimate criticisms on him. But like I've always said, he's not a terrible head coach, but he's not a great head coach. And all that said, he could be a good head coach and not good for where this team is right now. And that's where I think we sit right now with Billy Donovan. What this Chicago Bulls team is and what it looks like it's shaping up to be does not seem like it fits what Billy Donovan's strengths are. And that could change because rosters change. But as it stands right now, I'm not high on Billy Donovan, but I'm not as in the toilet with Billy Donovan as some Bulls fans are either. I just think that ultimately, like I said over on Locked on Bulls yesterday, I don't think that this front office moves on from Billy Donovan until they feel like they have a roster that's good enough to go into the luxury tax. If they look at the roster and say, no, this is a roster we believe in, we'd be willing to pay the tax for this roster. So it can't be that. We got to move on from Billy. Until that's the case, I think Billy Donovan, for better or worse, is going to be here. You guys can let me know what you think on that down below. All right, let's get into this next voicemail. The last voicemail, we got a text message after this one. The last voicemail from Arthur.
What up, Hayes? It's R-Dub here. Got a quick trade thought I want to run by you real quick. What do you think about trading Zach LaVine to the Atlanta Hawks for Bogdanovich, DeJounte Murray, and AJ Griffin? Let me know what you think.
Well, I think AJ Griffin was one of the players that we've heard that the Hawks actually want to hold on to. And while, package built around Bogdanovich, DeJounte Murray, and Adrian Griffin isn't terrible. I want to be clear there. I think the Bulls already reached out last year. We heard about a trade involving DeJounte Murray and Zach LaVine, and the Hawks just weren't interested. So I don't think that that's something that they look to do. I don't think they are really interested in Zach LaVine personally, and them having the number 1 overall pick. Some things could drastically change with their roster. I don't think you didn't make a bad deal for the Chicago Bulls, but I don't think that you really took a look at maybe what the Hawks would be looking at, and I don't think that they're really interested in Zach LaVine. I don't see them going in that direction. I could be wrong in that, but if for the sake, take all that away. If it was to be announced that the Chicago Bulls at the draft made a trade to get DeJounte Murray, Bogdanovich, and AJ Griffin for Zach LaVine, I would not be mad at that deal at all. I got some questions about, all right, what happens next on the roster for these type of things, but I wouldn't be mad at that deal at all, to answer your question. All right, let's get into the text message that we have. This one's actually from TJ's 2 text messages. I'm going to break them up one by one. The first one says, yo, what's up, Hayes? It's TJ. Had a question for you. I was wondering if the Chicago Bulls managed to trade up in the draft and keep number 11th overall pick, do you think it would rival the Sky's most recent draft in excitement? Also, how likely do you think the scenario is, and who do you see the Bulls draft with both picks? So I kind of went to, I'm not going to get into the picks exactly, kind of in my tier list. You can kind of figure that out. But if the Bulls are able to move up in this draft, get like a top 5 pick, top 8 pick, whatever, and keep their number 11 pick, I would think that would be tremendous for where this Bulls team is. Yes, this is a weaker draft, and it would be trusting this front office to make the right pick, which brings about its own concerns. But I don't hate the, like, you going after it and being aggressive to go out there and add some young talent to this team. I don't think that'll necessarily rival the Sky, because the Sky got 2 players. Like, if the Bulls had 2 picks in next year's draft in the first round, that would then rival the Sky. The Bulls really don't. This draft isn't as deep and doesn't have the kind of ceiling that last year's WNBA draft did. But I still do think there are some really good players that you can uncover in this draft that I like a whole lot for the Bulls. Nextly, you kind of figure this one. So, Hayes, I would love to see the Bulls trade up and get Donovan Clingan while keeping the 11th and drafting Devin Carter. I don't hate that. If that, like, it's not necessarily the picks that I would make in this draft, but if they walk away from this draft with replacing some bench depth with Devin Carter and getting your future starting center, because I still think Vooch probably starts in year 1, and Donovan Clingan, I don't hate that. I think you walk away from that draft and say the Bulls didn't do great, but they did solid. And that's what, it's better than what we've done so far, right? Those are 2 players that can contribute right away for the Chicago Bulls and bring some things that we need. I just don't know if Bulls fans would be necessarily head over heels for that, but I do think that you address some concerns there and players that could definitely help right away. I think that type of move, though, would mean that we're probably bringing back DeMar DeRozan, and we're taking a look at seeing what we got at that point. But, guys, thank you so much for the text, the voicemails, man. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.